Oral questions, question orale. L'honorable député.
The honourable member for Mégantic-l'Érable. After 9 years of extreme ideological policies, this Prime Minister is not worth the cost in lives lost by drug overdose. Today marks exactly 1 week, 7 days since the Premier of British Columbia asked him to back down from his disastrous experiment with legalizing hard drugs. When will the Prime Minister, the Liberal Prime Minister, put an end to his extreme policy that has caused chaos and death? Give us a date, please. The Honourable Minister for Mental Health and Addictions.
Mother, and as a member of this government, the tragedies that are happening across this country and the lives lost are completely devastating. It's shameful that the opposition continues to politicize this. In BC asked the federal government to work with them on a 3-year pilot program. They have come to us and asked for an amendment to that proposal. We are working through it with them because, Mr. Speaker, we have to get this right. We are here to save lives. We need to get it right with law enforcement. We need to get it right with our public health services because our focus here is to save lives so that people don't die alone. They have no plan and
The honourable member for Mégantic-l'Érable. This Prime Minister should be ashamed to have waited 7 days and to still not have announced putting an end to this program that is costing lives every day. 6 lives are lost every day in British Columbia from drug overdose, and the Liberals are just waiting around. There are dirty syringes on soccer fields. Nurses have to stop breastfeeding their children because they fear for the health of their children from the fumes of drugs used in hospital, Mr. Speaker. Crime is on the rise. People are afraid, and Quebecers are affected by this crisis too. When will the Prime Minister stop dilly-dallying and finally put an end to his radical experiment? We want a date, please. The Honourable Government House Leader. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. British Columbia has suggested some adjustments to their pilot project. We support them. Our approach is, and always has been, saving lives and reducing danger in communities. That is what we have committed to do, and that's what we are doing. We will not be taking any lessons, Mr. Speaker, from the Conservative Party. Their immoral policies failed. In fact, even an advisor to Stephen Harper called those policies very, very old and immoral. So we will not take lessons for them, and we will fix this on our own. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-l'Érable. Well, you know, the Prime Minister's hesitation is very worrying. He only has to say the word to put an end to this deadly experiment because he's the one responsible for Canada's criminal laws. End it now. It's as easy and simple as that. It's disturbing to see him stubbornly maintaining this extreme policy and with the support of the Bloc Québécois. This morning in the Journal de Montréal, we read that there's crack, heroin, and excrement in Montreal's Chinatown and in Montreal. In fact, the daycare in Chinatown and Montreal is at the center of growing violence, but just yesterday, the Bloc Québécois health critic reiterated his support for decriminalization. Will the Prime Minister finally say no today to legalizing hard drugs in Montreal and across the country? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, the member across the way knows full well that there have not been any official requests made by authorities in Montreal, in Quebec, or elsewhere. So this pilot project will not be extended to Quebec or to Montreal. He knows that full well, and I urge him to be factual. But, Mr. Speaker, we will not be taking any lessons from this Conservative Party, whose main advisor said that what the Conservatives did while they formed government was immoral. The Honourable Member for Stormont on the South Glengarry.
Since the BC NDP government begged this Prime Minister to reverse his decision that made it legal to shoot up heroin on public transit and to smoke meth and blow it into the faces of nurses in hospitals, on what date will the Liberals make that illegal again in British Columbia?
Good question. The Honourable Minister of Mental Health and Addictions.
Mr. Speaker, the province of BC came to the federal government with a 3-year pilot program using decriminalization so that people would not die alone, that they would get health care, Mr. Speaker. The BC government has asked for an amendment to their proposal. We are working through it with them, Mr. Speaker, because we need to get it right. We want people to live, Mr. Speaker, not be criminalized. We want them to get health care. The opposition doesn't have a plan, and all they do is stand there and shamefully fundraise off the lives of people who are dying.
The honourable member for Stormont Dundas South Glengarry.
It has been a week. Why is this not done already? The stories in BC are horrifying. Heroin shot up in parks, on buses, and even at Tim Hortons in Maple Ridge. Nurses having meth smoke blown in their face. Parents in Abbotsford scouring sports fields before their kids' games to make sure there's no needles and syringes around. But it gets worse. The Prime Minister won't even rule out expanding this to cities like Montreal and Toronto that have asked for the same craziness. Why won't they clearly give a date and frankly just end this failed policy now in BC and never expand this anywhere else in Canada?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, ever since the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms was born 42 years ago, Canadians have had confidence that their federal government will respect their charter-guaranteed rights and freedoms. Now, the Conservative Party will not say they have promised to tear up the Charter of Rights in matters of criminal justice. Now, where will they stop? They have not ruled out extending it to reproductive rights. They have not ruled out extending it to the rights of people for a fair trial. Where will these Conservatives stop when it comes to ripping up the rights of Canadians, Mr. Speaker?
L'honorable député de Manicouagan.
The honourable member for Manicouagan. Mr. Speaker, it's clear that there's a reason behind the plan to bring the CBC and Radio-Canada closer together. The goal is to protect the CBC from a future Conservative government that plans to make cuts to English-language public television. It has nothing to do with modernization. It has nothing to do with digital. It has nothing to do with efficiency. It's just management's means of defending itself against a possible future Conservative government. They are prepared to sacrifice Radio-Canada's identity to save the English-language CBC. Can the minister assure us that she has absolutely no intention of transforming Radio-Canada into a French-language version of the CBC?
The Ministre du Patrimoine Canadien.
The Honourable Canadian Heritage Minister. Mr. Speaker, the Bloc Québécois is speculating, and I would encourage them to be cautious with their speculation about what's occurring with Radio-Canada. I would like to reassure them they love Radio-Canada as we do, and I would like to reassure them that French language content and programming for Radio-Canada will remain distinct. Francophones throughout Canada watch Radio-Canada. Radio-Canada will use taxpayer money wisely. We know what the Conservatives want to do, though. They want to basically defund the public broadcaster, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Manicouagan. Mr. Speaker, the Heritage Minister is working on a plan on her end. CBC's management team is working on a plan on its end. The two aren't talking to each other, and they have no idea what each other's plans are. This is yet another example of the federal government's legendary efficiency. And these are the people we're supposed to be counting on to ensure Radio-Canada's independence from CBC. These are the people we are supposed to be counting on to ensure the future of broadcasting our culture. Will the minister heed the Bloc's proposal and make the CBC and Radio-Canada two separate, independent Crown corporations? The Honourable Canadian Heritage Minister. Mr. Speaker, the Bloc does not seem to understand that Crown corporations are managed internally at arm's length from government, and that is very important for freedom of the press, for our public broadcaster. Now, I commit to assessing the financial structure and governance of CBC and Radio-Canada to ensure that it is exactly what is needed in our times in 2024. The Bloc Québécois was not able to protect the public broadcaster from cuts when the Conservatives were in power, and they will not be able to protect Radio-Canada from a future Conservative government, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Rosemont-La Petite Patrie. Mr. Speaker, for 6 months now, Palestinians in Gaza have been subjected to bombing every single day. Over 34,000 people have been killed, including more than 14,000 children. A humanitarian crisis is unfolding before our very eyes. 1.5 million people have been displaced without medication, without fuel or food. The Liberals promised to issue 1,000 visas, but only 100 or so have actually been issued. 4 months after calling Immigration Canada, Ahmad had no answer, so he made his way here on his own. Today he has a question for the Immigration Minister. Will the minister save the lives of his nephews and nieces who are trapped in hell?
The Honorable Minister.
The Honourable Minister of Immigration. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We are working around the clock to get people out of Gaza. We have issued more than 100 visas, though. People are currently traveling from there to Canada. We are defending this operation, bringing people here, but Canada does not control exits from Rafah. But when people are able to exit, which we don't control, then they have biometric testing, and then we're able to bring them here. Thank you.
Moldy homes, no clean water, impassable roads, no internet. This is the reality of First Nation, Inuit, and Métis peoples in Canada under the Liberals and the Conservatives.
That's right.
Indigenous communities have identified over $400 billion in infrastructure needs because of historic underfunding. Yet the Liberals barely scratch the surface of this gap with the federal budget. What is the Liberals' plan to correct their discriminatory funding choices?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you very much, Speaker. I want to thank the member opposite for an important question. There's nothing more important to our government than reconciliation with the Indigenous peoples. And that's why from the very beginning, we've been working very closely in partnership with all Indigenous peoples across the country in ensuring that we rectify for the past injustices, to make the necessary investments. It is difficult work. It's work that we'll continue to do with Indigenous peoples, and that's why in this budget and budget passed, we have made tremendous amount of investments in Indigenous communities across the country, and will continue to do that work. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Kelowna Lake Country.
Liberals continue to insist they don't have enough data from the BC government to end the open drug use of hard drugs like cocaine or fentanyl on streets, in playgrounds and in hospitals in British Columbia. The BC government confirmed that they sent the Liberals the data that they requested within hours of asking. But if the minister can't make a decision, how about the fact that more British Columbians sadly died of overdoses in January and February of 2024 than in all of 2014? Wow. Why are these Liberals not being honest with Canadians and just end their radical drug policy?
The Honourable Minister of Mental Health and Addictions.
Mr. Speaker, every step of the way we have been working hand in hand with provincial jurisdictions, communities and municipalities across this country, speaking to families, speaking to health teams to understand how we save lives, Mr. Speaker. We are working with the province of BC on the amendment to their proposal. We need to get it right, Mr. Speaker. We need to make sure that communities are safe, but we also need to make sure that people aren't dying alone, that they are getting the healthcare services that they need. You can't treat someone if they're dead, Mr. Speaker. We are committed to saving lives.
The Honourable Member for Kelowna Lake Country.
Well, Mr. Speaker, if that member thinks that BC's experience with open public drug use is so great, then why isn't she advocating for it in her province? I was talking to a resident just 2 days ago from my constituency.
Hold on a sec. We are getting a lot of yelling back and forth, and I would appreciate it if people could just keep it down. I know, I'm hearing a lot. I'm hearing a lot from all ends of the chamber. So I just want to make sure that we keep the down as we debate these important issues. The Honourable Member of Kelowna Lake Country.
Well, Mr. Speaker, if that member thinks that the BC experience with open public drug policies and drug use is so great, then why isn't she advocating for it in her own province? I was talking to a resident from my community just a couple nights ago who told me she came around the corner from her apartment to be faced with something that burnt her eyes. And people were openly using drugs on the street. She is rightfully concerned about what she is exposed to, and unfortunately this is not an isolated incident. After 9 years of this Prime Minister, enough is enough. Why are these Liberals not being honest with Canadians and just end their drug policies?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Of course, Mr. Speaker, that question has been asked many times and answered many times by my honourable colleague, the Minister. What I want to know, this member is a female member of her caucus. This morning, the headline reads, "Conservatives don't rule out using notwithstanding clause beyond criminal justice matters."
Shameful.
50 years ago, Roe v. Wade was enacted in the U.S., and women have lived under that protection in the U.S. for 50 years. For 42 years.
Order. goes all ways. To be able to keep it down so I can actually hear the answers, the questions, and of course the answers. The Honourable Government House Leader.
From the top.
15 seconds.
For 50 years, women in the U.S. have lived under the protection of Roe v. Wade. For 42 years in Canada, women in Canada have lived under the protection of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Now Conservatives will not rule out using the notwithstanding clause beyond criminal justice matters. Will that member stand in her place and tell us what rights from women does she intend to take away?
Hear, hear.
That'll get you back up to 20% of the polls, Steve. Say 50 seats in the next election.
Ready for the next question? Yes. All right. The Honourable Member for Langley Aldergrove.
After 9 years of this Liberal NDP Prime Minister, it is clear that he is not worth the crime, the chaos, the drugs, and the disorder. As a direct result of his extremist drug policies, we have open drug use in front of an elementary school in Langley, discarded needles at a playground in Willoughby, and crack smoking at a bus stop in Brookswood. People from Langley want to know, when is this Prime Minister going to end his extremist experiment to legalize hard drugs like cocaine, fentanyl, and opioids?
The Honourable Minister of Mental Health and Addictions.
Mr. Speaker, I will say this again. We have to approach the opioid crisis and the illegal toxic drug supply with compassion, science, evidence, and healthcare, Mr. Speaker. On this side of the House, we all want the same thing: public safety and access to public healthcare services so that people don't die alone. We are approaching the issue of public consumption with urgency, Mr. Speaker, working with the BC government on their requested amendments to their proposal. BC asked for this exemption. We will continue to work with them hand in hand because families are demanding it of us. They don't want to lose their loved ones, and on this side of the House, we will save lives.
The Honourable Member for Langley Aldergrove.
Well, the results are in, and they're a disaster. 2,500 opioid overdoses last year.
Order. Order. If we need to shut things down over here, I need to shut things down over there. So try to keep the chatter down. The Honourable Member for Langley Aldergrove.
The results are in. And they are a disaster. 2,500 deaths last year, and 6 on average every day this year. Now, the Liberal minister responsible for hard drug use says, well, she's waiting for more information from BC, but the BC government says they've given her all the information, as if 2,500 drug deaths in 1 year isn't enough data to go on. So Canadians want to know, why are Liberals misleading them? And when are they going to put an end to this disastrous, failed drug use experiment?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
That question has been asked and answered. BC has been making adjustments to their pilot project, and of course, Mr. Speaker, we are supporting them. But I had no luck with the last member. Let me ask this member. Conservatives will not rule out using the notwithstanding clause.
Order, order. As I have said before, if I need to shut the noise down in one corner of the room, I need to shut it down in the other corner of the room. So please let the Honourable Member respond so we can get on to the next question. The Honourable Government House Leader from the top. All right.
Mr. Speaker, of course BC is making adjustments to their pilot project, and we are supporting them in that endeavour, and the member should be under no ambiguity about that. The member is ambiguous, however, like his previous colleague, about which charter protections that party would rip up. Is it reproductive rights? Is it the right to a fair trial? Is it the right to free expression, Mr. Speaker? That member needs to get up, that party needs to get up, that leader needs to get up and tell Canadians exactly which fundamental charter rights they will be taking away from Canadians.
I'm trying to shut down that end. I'm trying to shut down this end. I want to be able to hear the answers to the questions and the answer, and that's enough of that. The Honourable Member for North Okanagan-Shuswap.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years, this Prime Minister is clearly not worth the cost. His minister responsible for hard drugs on the streets is misleading Canadians. She said the Liberal government is waiting for more information from BC on if they should reverse their decision that allows cocaine, opioids, and fentanyl in parks, playgrounds, and hospitals. The BC NDP government confirmed they answered within hours to the government's request for more information. Why is this Liberal NDP government misleading Canadians, and why can't they just end their disastrous drug policy?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that member needs to unplug from the wall, replug and reboot. He's not listening to the earlier questions. We've told them very clearly, BC has requested changes, and we are working with BC to make those changes. But maybe that member will tell us specifically which freedoms, which rights described in the 42-year-old Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms that Canadians cherish will he be advocating removing from Canadian women, from Canadian people? Is it the freedom of expression? Is it reproductive rights?
The Honourable Member for North Okanagan, Shuswap.
I'd like to remind the member that his government illegally invoked the Emergencies Act, removing civil liberties from Canadians.
Exactly what they did. Guilty of it. Broke the law.
After 9 years of radical NDP Liberal government drug policies and toxic drug deaths in BC reaching a 380% increase, the number of children aged 10 to 18 who have died from overdoses has increased by more than 5 times. Opioids and illicit drugs are now the leading cause of death of youth aged 10 to 18 in BC. Will the Prime Minister end his radical drug policies, or will he continue to show he's simply not worth the cost?
The Honourable Minister of Labour.
Speaker, there are right ways to go about things, and then there are explosive and dramatic and catastrophic ways to go about things. To talk about using the notwithstanding clause, and I quote,
I'm going to make sure the Honourable Minister has his time. The Honourable Minister of Labour.
The Leader of the Opposition's response that all of my proposals are constitutional and we will make them constitutional using whatever tools the Constitution allows me to use to make them constitutional. I think you know exactly what I mean, he says. They will happen and they will stay in place. For anybody like me who has a right that was afforded to him because of this charter in my lifetime, these are chilling words that they...
L'honorable député de Repentigny.
The Honourable Member for Repentigny. The Honourable Member for Repentigny. Canada's greenhouse gas emissions increased in 2021-2022. That is why the advisory group appointed by the Environment Minister himself is issuing a warning. The warning is, climate policies work when they exist. In other words, they do not work if they do not exist, such as in the oil industry, where emissions are still rising. And emissions are bound to soar with this week's Wednesday opening of Trans Mountain, a new dirty oil pipeline with no emissions cap for oil. When is the minister going to rein in big oil instead of building pipelines? The Honourable Environment Minister. Mr. Speaker, my colleague should closely read the report published yesterday because it says that as compared with 2019, before the pandemic, our emissions are 44 million tons lower than they were in 2019. That is the equivalent of getting half of Canada's vehicles off the road. The last time our GHG emissions were this low, when O.J. Simpson was on trial a long time ago. It's been a long time since our emissions were this low. So our plan is working, and we need to continue to fight climate change. The Honourable Member for Repentigny. Yesterday, the minister boasted that Canada was, I quote, the only major oil producer in the world to have proposed putting a cap on oil emissions. The operative word being propose, not impose. I would remind the minister that once he had greater ambitions than proposing to be more progressive than Russia and Saudi Arabia. And while the minister is proposing to do better than those countries, well, he's also opening up a shiny new Trans Mountain pipeline. When are we going to see some action? Not action to increase emissions, but action to reduce them. The Honourable Environment Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If my colleague had read yesterday's report, she would see that our track record is similar to that of Germany, that of Italy, and better than Italy and the United States. We're not like Russia and Iran here. Our climate performance is better than the United States's. We have already tabled our consultation document to cap oil and gas emissions. We will have draft regulation this year and final regulations by next year. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For Parkland.
Well, Mr. Speaker, this NDP Liberal Prime Minister isn't worth the crime, chaos, drugs, and disorder that he's unleashed on our streets. And after 9 years, this Prime Minister's radical experiments with legalized hard drugs is turning our hospitals, beaches, and schoolyards into one giant drug injection site. Our children are witnessing drug abuse, discarded needles, and overdoses as they play and learn. And the Prime Minister's taxpayer-funded drugs are now ending up in the hands of our children. When will this Prime Minister stop treating our communities like his own personal woke petri dish and end his radical experiments on Canadians? Hear, hear.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Once again, that question has been asked many times and answered. I wonder about their hearing over there. But let me read, we get mail, Mr. Speaker. Let me read a quote. Canada's significant credit strengths will continue to preserve its AAA-rated sovereign credit profile, underpinned by its high economic strength and very strong institutions and governance. Together, these factors provide Canada with a strong foundation for future growth and very high degree of economic resiliency to potential shocks. Mr. Speaker, thank you to Moody's Credit Ratings.
Hear, hear. The Honourable Member for York Simcoe.
After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, Canadians are struggling. In rampant crime, drugs and disorder have become the norm. Instead of offering treatment and support to those who need it, this Prime Minister is jeopardizing the safety of Canadians by allowing hard drugs to be used openly in public, on buses, in hospitals, and right in front of children and their families. Enough! Will these Liberals end their radical drug policies, or will they inflict the same chaos seen in BC elsewhere?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
That question has been asked and answered, but the letter goes on, Mr. Speaker. It says, in addition, Canada's credit profile has very limited susceptibility to event risks, supported by stable political institutions, a strong and well-regulated banking system, and reserve currency status, which underscores the government's deep and unfettered market access. At the same time, despite an initial sharp deterioration in the government's fiscal position from the pandemic, Canada's debt ratios have since materially improved, and the government is pursuing a gradual path of fiscal consolidation. Thank you, Moody's Credit Rating.
The Honourable Member for Northumberland, Peterborough South.
We all know, Canadians have never had it so good. We hear it over and over again. During Wednesday's question period, the Prime Minister guaranteed to the Canadian public, those who are counting on interest rates going down, that they will start coming down in the next 2 months. That's great news. The problem? The Bank of Canada, the organization that actually decides interest rates, says they haven't decided that yet. So, Mr. Speaker, simple question for the government. Who's lying, the Governor of the Bank of Canada or the Prime Minister?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Based on what the Conservatives are saying, then they are going to need to explain to Canadians how Canada is rated #1 for budget balance by the International Monetary Fund, maintains a AAA credit rating reaffirmed by Moody's just yesterday, has the best net debt to GDP ratio and the lowest deficit in the G7, has been projected by the IMF and the OECD to have the strongest economic growth in the G7, and is #1 in the world when you adjust per capita in foreign direct investment. Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we continue to lead. On that side of the House, they continue to mislead.
The Honourable Member for Northumberland, Peterborough South.
Mr. Speaker, over the last 6 quarters, we've had declining GDP per capita growth. We've had 0 GDP per capita growth in the last 10 years. And this government's response, more spending money, more spreading fire on the already burning out of control inflationary fire. $61 billion in new spending. But once again, I ask, Canadians are barely hanging on. Some of them are going to lose their houses short. Will they stand behind the Prime Minister's word and guarantee that interest rates will go down? Or is it more misinformation from this government?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians shouldn't listen to the trumped-up rhetoric of the Conservatives when it comes to our economy. Just yesterday, the independent governor of the Bank of Canada reaffirmed that due to our commitment to the key fiscal guardrails we have put in place, that he believes, and I quote, "Since the government's net fiscal plan hasn't changed a lot, I don't think it's going to have a big effect on our projections for the economy or inflation." And with inflation in the target range for 3 months in a row, Canadians have reason for hope. Conservatives are looking to cut our investments in the middle class, and we're not going to let them.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton-Griesbach.
Edmontonians are fed up with Loblaws' sky-high prices and record profits at their expense. Every time they go to the grocery store, they have to put food back on the shelves. The Liberals are doing nothing about it, and the Conservatives are in the pocket of Galen Weston. People are frustrated, using their power to boycott Loblaws. Edmontonians deserve a government that fights for them, not wealthy CEOs. When will the Liberals open their ears, start listening to Canadians, and stop the greed?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I know that the member opposite feels that grocery prices are too high, and they have been certainly. But good news is that the CPI index has showed that food prices are stabilizing in our economy, which is good news for Canadians. What our government is doing is proposing multiple rounds of reforms to our Competition Act, and it's good to see the NDP and other parties starting to work with us. Just this week, earlier this week, we got C-59 through the Finance Committee, which was great progress on reforming our competition laws. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Courtenay Alberni.
Sadly, Alberta is on track to have the most toxic drug deaths per capita in Canada by June. Clearly, Alberta's Conservatives' recovery-only model is tragically failing. But you know who's jumped on board to support it? The Conservative leader. And while he regularly meets up with far-right extremist groups, he won't even meet with Moms Stop the Harm, families who've lost loved ones to the toxic drug crisis. That's the kind of guy he is. But the Liberals have let this happen by not taking a national approach to fighting this crisis. When will this Liberal government finally intervene?
Anybody want to pick that one up? Okay, sorry, my one eye is not working. The Honourable Minister of Mental Health and Addictions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I want to thank the member for his question, because too many Canadians are dying every day from this ever-challenging illegal toxic drug supply. But the opposition leader talks a big talk about investing in treatment. But when they were last in government, they cut 2/3 of their own drug treatment fund. Will he slam the door in the face of those groups like Moms Stop the Harm who are asking for help? Will he cancel safe consumption sites knowing that this saves lives? Will he refuse to meet the moment of this situation and just use slogans and do nothing? Or will he commit to harm reduction, prevention, treatment, and saving lives?
L'honorable député de Pontiac.
The Honourable Member for Pontiac. Mr. Speaker, the other day, I was asking myself why it's so important for Canada to reduce its emissions. And it's important for our economy. We can't thrive economically if we aren't thriving in the area of the environment. Looking at the National Inventory Report, I was pleased to see that we have reduced our greenhouse gas emissions. So I'd like to ask the Minister of the Environment what next steps are to ensure that we remain on the right path. The Honourable Minister of the Environment. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank my colleague for her question. Yes, yesterday's report, as confirmed by the Canadian Climate Institute, the report shows that we are reaching our 2026 interim goal and our 2030 goals. We're on the right path. We have reduced our GHG emissions to an extent that is the equivalent of removing 15 million vehicles from our roads, but we do need to do more, and that is why we're aiming to have a carbon-neutral transportation network by 2035 and a GHG cap, which will be coming out soon.
Thousand Islands, Rideau Lakes.
$110 million. That's how much this Liberal employment minister's private company landed from this Liberal government. The Liberal minister used his role to get meetings for his business partner with the finance minister and with the prime minister's office, using his position to enrich his business partner and himself. After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, it's clear they're not worth the cost and certainly not the corruption. So how much taxpayer cash did this Liberal minister pocket on the backs of hardworking Canadians?
Corruption. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, Canada, of course, has the most stringent ethics rules for elected parliamentarians in almost all of the world. The minister has addressed this question, and it's pretty clear the Conservatives will do anything they can to distract from their vow to rip up the Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
That's right. The Honourable Member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes.
Of course, Speaker, these Liberals are trying to distract and divide. A common-sense Conservative government would, of course, only use the notwithstanding clause on matters of criminal justice. It's unconscionable that this government would allow a mass murderer like the Quebec mosque shooter to ever be released from prison. He murdered 6 innocent worshippers, and the only way he should have left maximum security was in a box.
That's right.
Our question was about the corruption of their government, the employment minister pocketing cash on the backs of taxpayers. Will they do the right thing and call in the RCMP?
That's right. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Well, it's very nice, Mr. Speaker, to have some clarity on that. I remind that member that at one time in this country, reproductive rights were a criminal matter. So could he lay out in very specific detail for this House, now that he's talking about the notwithstanding clause, very specifically, would he make reproductive rights for women in this country into a criminal matter? Once again, yes or no?
Yeah. The Honourable Member for St. Albert, Edmonton.
Speaker, a lobbying firm owned by the business partner of the lone Alberta minister secured $110 million in federal contracts. As money went out the door, the minister was receiving payments from the very same lobbying firm. This is scandalous. Canadians deserve to know, what was the minister's cut? How much was he paid?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Canada has incredibly stringent ethics rules, Mr. Speaker, and the minister has addressed those questions. But this member has, I don't know if he's communicated with his honourable friend that just got up, but maybe he could answer for us specifically now. Which criminal matters will apply to the ripping up of Canada's fundamental rights and freedoms? I would ask him to be very specific, point us to chapter and verse. Which rights of Canadians is he vowing to rip up today?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Member for St. Albert, Edmonton.
Mr. Speaker, the minister is clearly in full cover-up mode because it gets worse. The minister's business partner was lobbying the minister's own department as checks were being cut from the lobbying firm to the minister. If that doesn't smell of self-dealing and corruption, I don't know what does. So again, how much did the minister pocket from this lobbying firm since he was appointed at CAP?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Well, of course, Mr. Speaker, the minister has addressed that question, but I want to return to this theme. The Conservatives.
We have a number of questions to go, so I want to make sure that we have order in the House. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, it's pretty clear those folks over here have not really spoken and gotten their story straight. We have this member proposing to put reproductive rights back into a category of criminal behavior. We have other members who will not answer which specific rights they will take away. This member has refused to stand up and answer the question of which, is it the freedom of expression? What specific rights would your leader take away as a result of his vow to tear up the Charter of Rights and Freedoms?
Make sure the questions and answers to the chair. L'honorable député de...
The Honourable Member for Terrebonne. Mr. Speaker, SMEs are increasingly telling us that the federal government is acting predatory about CEBA. They're telling us that they've paid back the entirety of their Canada Emergency Business Account loan, but because of delays of sometimes only a few days that they're not even responsible for, the federal government is still cutting their $20,000 grant. These Liberals are showing a great deal of intransigence, and they're threatening these businesses with bankruptcy. Why? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
And I want to thank that member for continued advocacy for small businesses in Canada. We share that view, and that is why that the CEBA program supported over 900,000 small businesses through the pandemic, and we estimate 80% of them have repaid their loans so far. As we move away from the pandemic, we are taking serious concrete action to support small businesses, both by providing funding and cutting costs, Mr. Speaker. And I'm getting heckled, of course, by the Conservatives who voted against every single measure that we have put forward since 2015 to support small businesses. Thank you.
L'honorable député de Terrebonne.
The Honourable Member for Terrebonne. Mr. Speaker, the government is supposed to support struggling businesses and not hit them when they're down. This is a perfect yet upsetting illustration of how the federal government mismanages programs. You can't get a human being on the line when you call the federal government. This rigid way of managing things shows no humanity. Can the government tell us how many businesses have paid back the money but will still miss out on $20,000 due to the federal government's lack of humanity?
Thank you again, Mr. Speaker. I answered that question, the previous answer, with 80%, nearly 80% of small businesses have actually already paid back their CEBA loans. As we move forward from the pandemic, small businesses have nearly 3 years until the end of 2026, Mr. Speaker, to repay their CEBA loans, and they have access to low 5% interest rate. Meanwhile, we are investing in communities, strengthening our economy. Budget 2024 has a number of supports for small businesses, whether it's through supporting startups with AI, quantum. Mr. Speaker, I'm looking forward to more to come to speak to and more.
The Honourable Member for Coast Bay Central Notre Dame.
Mr. Speaker, last week, Winston at the Gandern Area Food Bank confirmed that usage is up 44% in just 6 months. He's concerned about volunteer burnout, Mr. Speaker. The CEO of Food Banks Canada now says that due to record-smashing demand, food banks are on the brink. For folks forced to now use food banks, Mr. Speaker, who never had to do it before, this government and this NDP Liberal Prime Minister is not worth the cost. So will he stop his increase in carbon tax by 23%, or better still, axe the tax so that Canadians can afford to put food on the table?
Yeah, axe the tax. The Honourable Minister of Labour.
$1,192 for a family of 4 in Newfoundland and Labrador, Mr. Speaker. $760 for a family of 4 in New Brunswick. $824 in Nova Scotia. $880 in PEI. $1,120 in Ontario. $1,200 in Manitoba. $1,800 in Alberta. These aren't phony benefits. These aren't chicken feed, as it's been described by the other side. This is cold, hard cash. This goes into the pockets of Canadians. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Yorkton Melville.
Canadians cannot wait for a Conservative government to restore all of the rights and freedoms that this government has destroyed. After 9 years, this NDP Liberal Prime Minister has driven 2 million people to food banks. With record-smashing demand and donations drying up, the CEO of Food Banks Canada says food banks are becoming unsustainable. Knowing Canadians are suffering, this Prime Minister raised the carbon tax by 23% and refused to pass 234 in its original form to make food less expensive for Canadians. He's not worth the cost. Why is this Prime Minister punishing the poor and exterminating the middle class?
Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety.
Wow, Mr. Speaker, that member who has advocated to roll back the rights of women just stood in this place and said that conservatives can't wait to implement those measures. Mr. Speaker, women will remember what conservatives are saying. They are saying they will take away women's rights just like in the U.S., and we will not stand for it.
The Honourable Member for Lanark, Frontenac, Kingston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, did you ever wonder why former inmates who have had vocational training while incarcerated are just as likely to reoffend as those who have not, despite the fact that Corrections Canada claims to have issued 112,000 vocational certificates in the past 3 years alone? Well, the answer is this. These vocational certificates are meaningless participation awards. In the same period, only 64 inmates in the entire country were able to complete a Red Seal apprenticeship program. Why has Corrections Canada failed to introduce real vocational certification programs?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, the Harper Conservatives did everything in their power to restrict corrections from being able to offer offenders vocational opportunities to ensure that there isn't recidivism. Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives' own former criminal justice expert has come out condemning Conservative policy, saying it was not based in facts. Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives, when it comes to criminal justice, do nothing to keep our communities safe, but we have.
The Honourable Member for Yukon.
Mr. Speaker, the overdose crisis continues to devastate our country, and no region, including the North, has been spared. As a former Chief Medical Officer, I'm also deeply concerned by the level of disinformation currently being promulgated by the Conservatives. The study that I proposed is currently in Health Committee, allowing all parties to travel around the country, learn from experts, and make thoughtful recommendations to the government. Can the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions tell us if she agrees that to address this crisis we need to work together using the full spectrum of tools that we have?
The Honourable Minister of Mental Health and Addictions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the member. Just like the member from the Yukon said, we need to trust in science and in healthcare, not slogans written on the back of a napkin. Canada's model recognizes that prevention and treatment are two ends of the spectrum of care, but we also must care for people. People who are struggling in between the spaces while they struggle with substance use. People need to be alive to make it to recovery. Canada's model means supporting cities. It means supporting Indigenous peoples with the Emergency Treatment Fund. It means preventative measures like implementation of the Icelandic model. It means providing law enforcement with the tools they need. It means saving lives.
L'honorable député de Portneuf, Jacques Cartier.
Miss.
The Honourable Member for Portneuf, Jacques Cartier. Mr. Speaker, to listen to this government, you'd think that everything's going great, but actually, people are smothered by the cost of living. They can barely pay the bills after 9 years of this Liberal government. Currently, servicing the debt costs more than $54 billion. That's more than the health transfers to our provinces and territories. And the Bloc Québécois voted for this. The Bloc members say one thing and do the exact opposite. When will this Prime Minister stop wasting money so that Quebecers can regain their pride? The Honourable Government House Leader, I will tell my honourable colleague what Quebecers have regained: dental care, school lunch programs, nearly 35,000 new childcare spots funded by the Canadian government. They have regained a housing program and billions of dollars that have been agreed on with the Legault government in order to build new housing faster. So what Quebecers have regained here is progress, well-being, and real forward movement. The Honourable Member, as I was saying, this government thinks everything is doing great. I would like to invite them to visit some grocery stores. We see grocery stores putting anti-theft chips on T-bone steaks. That's how bad it is. After 9 years of this Liberal government, our debt has doubled And yet our friends in the Bloc Québécois have voted for $500 billion in additional spending. Yesterday, Tiff Macklem, the Governor of the Bank of Canada, confirmed that this government's expenses is keeping interest rates high. When will this Prime Minister, supported by the Bloc Québécois, stop wasting money on the backs of Quebecers? The Honourable Government House Leader. Well, my colleague maybe didn't see the same thing as I did, but yesterday, the Governor of the Bank of Canada, the same person, by the way, that the Conservatives promised to fire, said that he is considering returning to a decrease in interest rates. And that is all confirmed by credit rating agencies like Moody's that are keeping Canada with its stable AAA credit rating. That's worth its weight in gold. We are responsible and are governing for Quebecers and Canadians. The Honourable Member for Beauce. Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of this Prime Minister, who's not worth the cost, his habits of wasting money have not changed. And so interest rates are extremely high, as we heard yesterday, confirmed by the Governor of the Bank of Canada. In my riding, Beauce, people are visiting food banks more, 20% more. It just shows that voting for the Bloc Québécois or the Liberals has a high cost. The Bloc Québécois keeps voting to support this inflationary government. When will this Prime Minister stop wasting money and help Quebecers feed and house themselves? The Honourable Government House Leader. Well, not only are there all the investments that I just enumerated, but also Canada has a AAA credit rating, the best in the G7, in fact, the best possible rating. And Moody's mentioned Canada's predictable, stable economic future, which was supported yesterday by the Governor of the Bank of Canada, who said that he is considering a decrease in interest rates in the near future, and we're very pleased about that.
L'honorable député de Châteauguay-Lacolle.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Democracies throughout the world are being increasingly threatened by state and non-state actors. For example, we've seen the direct aggression affecting Ukraine, as well as cybersecurity problems. And there's another threat that is ever-growing, right-wing and conspiracy theorist extremism. Can the Government House Leader tell us about the importance of standing firm against these threats? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, what with the week we've just had, and dare I say even the last half hour, has been very sad for democracy in Canada. This conservative party, is clearly committed to destroying our fundamental rights. And we saw recently that the leader of the Conservative Party is encouraging white nationalists, anarchists, and misogynists. Things are going in a very dark direction, and I'm concerned.
Mr. Speaker, wildland firefighters have tirelessly kept our communities safe against devastating wildfires. But despite this dangerous and life-saving work, wildland firefighters aren't considered firefighters under the National Occupational Classification. And this impacts their retirement and pensions. It's absurd that the Liberal government and the Conservatives before them have done nothing to fix this. So will the Liberals immediately change this so that wildland firefighters can retire with financial security?
The Honourable Minister of Emergency Preparedness.
Mr. Speaker, I want to take this opportunity to thank all the wildland firefighters who have done amazing work. We have been working very closely with the provincial counterparts to address this issue, but one thing, make it clear, in fact, actually, we care very deeply for the work that they're doing. That's why we've actually increased the tax credit for the volunteer firefighters as well. So we'll do everything possible to making sure that we support them. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Kitchener Centre.
Mr. Speaker, the Ontario government is proceeding with construction on the destructive and unnecessary Highway 413, a $10 billion waste of public money to pave through the Greenbelt. This government could have put a stop to it by requiring a thorough environmental assessment in a Restored and Repaired Impact Assessment Act. Instead, they've proposed a change in an omnibus budget bill that could still let projects like Highway 413 off the hook. Will this government strengthen the proposed IAA and reject Highway 413 to prevent paving over 2,400 acres of farmland and green space?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank my honourable colleague for his question. I would remind him that the Supreme Court of Canada, in an opinion last year, told us that we had to revise the Impact Assessment Act. This is exactly what we do. But through an agreement with the Ontario government, we will make sure that federal laws like Species at Risks Act or the Migratory Birds will be able to apply to Project 413, and these elements will be assessed as part of this project. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
And that's all the time we have for question period today.